She had a smile that would light up a room. She had a passion for basketball. Then she picked up golf, and she was a natural with that. She really enjoyed the game.
The one thing that caught us truly off guard going towards the end is we didn't realize how badly she felt about herself. Look at the pictures. Why would we think she had a self-esteem problem? But the fact of the matter is that was one of the major engines that drove her to areas where she really didn't need to go, didn't have to go.
My spoons started to disappear. And I'm not talking, one or two. It'd be like, okay, I have like 3 spoons left.
And I remember I had $150 some in my wallet. When I went to pay that, I had $75. And of course she started crying. And yes, I came down. Yes, I took your credit card. Yes, I used it.
And I remember going to court the next day and beautiful Marin, and then bringing her in, shackles on her ankles in these prison uniform. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, how did we get here? I was just numb.
She needed the money to pay some people back, and she needed the money to trade the gas for the heroin.
If you would have asked us, what do you know about heroin? I would have said a street drug, a junkie's drug. Not something that you hear about on TV. It's not something that you would find in a community like Pickerington or any suburb. I mean, every day was that we have to keep her alive. We have to save her. If she said she was going to a meeting, I would follow ahead of time and sit in the parking lot and see her walk in, because I could breathe again, because she showed up. We got one more day. She's sober one more day. She never even had a car, but she still found a way to get it because they would just bring it to the house when we were sleeping.
I remember walking into the apartment, and I've never heard such a horrendous scream in all my life. When I went up and walked through that bathroom door and saw him there holding my daughter, I knew immediately she'd passed away.
I know she really wanted to make it. And I know she doesn't want to see any other family go through what we have gone through. And I know she wants me to talk about it. And I found her journal that I bought for her. In her journal, she wrote a goodbye letter to heroin. Dear heroin, before I met you, I was full of life, at least from what I thought. But then problems started coming my way that gave me the excuse to meet you. It was like love at first sight. Not only did you do things for me, but boy, did I do things for you. I lied to my family, friends, and even more importantly, I lied to myself. I would steal and cheat for you. I would risk my freedom and my life for you. But our relationship went to hell when the first and last time you really almost took me away forever. You had me for 7 minutes. I won this battle, and I will never have to suffer again. Sincerely, your worst enemy, Marin Briggs. She still went back to it. That it was still because of the grip it had on her.
Do I miss her every day? Oh, sure.
We can't bring her back, and we can't go back. But if we can help other people by telling our story, then that's what we have to do.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. We've no less days to sing God's grace than when we'd first begun.
You know, I've seen that video perhaps a dozen times over the last year, and it still tears me apart to watch it every single time. That story keeps playing itself out over and over and over again, not just here in our community, but in our county, throughout the state, and all around the United States. I attended a funeral just last Friday night for a man. He wasn't 80 years old. He wasn't even 50 years old. He was only 25 years old. And one of his best friends is here tonight, and so is his mom. We've got to do something about it. The church needs to do something about it. And we're going to at least begin by talking about it tonight, right? Before we begin, I would like to invite Mrs. Andrea Mindling up to say a few words and to pray over the evening. She is Pastor Mindling's wife, and Pastor Jim has been down with bronchitis, a really bad case of it, for the past few days, so she's stepping in. Okay?
Thank you, Don. Don, thank you for all the work that you've done in bringing this opioid epidemic, what is the role of the church seminar and series of talks for the next 3 Monday nights. So this is just the first of 3 sessions, but I just want to say thank you for being here on behalf of my husband, Jim, and myself, and Church of the Open Door. We are excited to be able to join together, band together as the body of Christ in the community where this really is an epidemic, and what a heart-wrenching story to watch Marin and her parents struggle with all of this, and I've been affected. Our church family has been affected. I think everybody in this room is here because you know someone or you have known about this issue, and you're here to make a difference. And so we just thank you from the bottom of our hearts for coming. We encourage you to invite your friends the next couple Monday nights, and let's just get informed. And together, I believe we can really, really make a difference. I just also want to stop and pray before we jump into this. Because without God on our side, and He is always on our side as we know, He created these people who have gotten sucked into the opioid epidemic, just like he's created you and I. And we all struggle with something. And these are very real struggles, very everyday people, people we walk into all the time, and God loves each one of them. He has not created one person that he doesn't value as much as the others. So let's just join in prayer and ask God to bless our time tonight. Father God, so much. We thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight as a group of people who want to say we care about every person who struggles in life with this crisis, this opioid crisis. And we are here to stand up and say, we want to make a difference. And so, Lord, we have brought together people who are experts in their fields, people who will share stories and facts and information. And yet we also know that behind every story and behind piece of information, we're talking about people who are created in your image, who you purposed on this world, on this journey to be all that you wanted them to be. And Lord, I believe sometimes we fall short. And so we just ask that you would open our eyes, give us a keen awareness of what we can do as individuals, as churches, as a community, to make an impact in this epidemic, Lord. We can't do it without you, and we ask that you would just be with us tonight. Shed your light, give us knowledge, insight, give us a passion, and then lead us to action, God, so we can make a difference collectively. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Well, first, let me begin by saying this is not about Church of the Open Door. This is not about Church of the Nazarene or Midway Baptist or any church. This is about the church, Christ's church. And that's why we're all here tonight. Over the period of the next 3 weeks, we will take a different focus each of the 3 weeks. Tonight, our guests include the police chief of Elyria. We also have Pastor Rick Stein of the First United Presbyterian Church here in Elyria. We have the county coroner, Stephen Evans, as well as Lorain County Sheriff Phil Stamiti. And they are all here tonight going to be talking more about the facts and figures of what exactly is going on. I think we kind of need that as a background going forward. Next week, when we are here, we will be talking about the psychology of addiction. And Tom Stuber from the Lakota Way will take us through the different steps or the different stages of addiction. It truly is a disease. It truly is. And he will open your eyes to all the different things that an addict goes through. And I've only been involved in this thing for like about 3 years, and I've come to the point where I hate the word addict. I hate it, but it seems to be the word that everybody knows, so I will use it when I need to. The third week, we will be talking more about treatment, the different kinds of treatment there are out there. And we will also have Judge John Maraldi with us, who will talk about the Lorain County Drug Court as well. Additionally, each week, one of our guests has been asked to directly speak to what he feels the role of the church should be, or how the church can help. And I've also asked that where appropriate, our other guests maybe include that as well. So to begin this off tonight, I would like to ask Pastor Rick Stein of the First Presbyterian Church in downtown Elyria to come on up. Let's give him a nice round of applause, okay?
My name's Rick Stein. I began pastoring First United Presbyterian Church on the corner of 2nd Street and East Avenue, right almost downtown, October 1st in 2006, 3 months after I graduated from Pittsburgh Theological Seminary. I've been clean and sober for 15 years. My sobriety date is November 19th, 2002. I did a lot of crazy things in my life. I'm not sure how I fit into this because heroin's about the only thing I never did. But I'm an addict. I know Don doesn't like to use it, but I'm an addict. My drugs of choice over the last 30 years pretty much was alcohol and marijuana. But in my college years in the 70s, I did everything except probably heroin. And then I moved back home, met my wife, and 3 years after we were married, I took her back to where I went to college, and she had heard stories about my life through some friends, but she'd never really experienced the heavy-duty stuff. And so we walked into the fraternity house that I belonged to, and there were 3 guys sitting on the couch as I walked in the door with Mary, and they looked at me, and one of the guys says, "My God, you're still alive." That's how deep I was back then. But you know, like any good addict, I tried to stay out of trouble. I was a very functioning person. I had jobs. We were blessed. We never lost our house. We were able to pay our bills, but we never had any money to do anything fun. You know, I never took my kids to Disney World. I never did anything exciting, you know, because we never had the money. Because whatever money we had left over, I spent. And so, you know, because being in recovery, I say I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, and Mary will say, "But you're a recovering alcoholic and a recovering drug addict." But you know, that's the difference between her and me. You know, if I like to think that I'm still an addict, even though I've been 15 years sober and clean, and because if I start to take it easy, then I will get in trouble. Because see, even though I've been clean, I still think like an alcoholic and a drug addict. I still have these tendencies of wanting to do weird things. And so if I don't stay, so I can't get too comfortable with what with who I am. I just have to continue to work my program, continue to surround myself with good people. I mean, when I went into recovery, it was a total life change. I had to drop all my friends. I've got 2 good friends that I still hang with, and they support me. But they weren't like me. They were just normal people, you know. And so I still spend a lot of time with them. And I just even though I was a good guy, I sucked the life out of my family. All right? You know, I did all the parent things. I went to band concerts. I went to football games. I went to swim meets. I went to soccer matches. Went to PTA, and everybody thought I was a good guy. But you know, I had this. I lived in this underworld that no one knew about, and so I was there physically for my family, but I was not there emotionally. You know, and you know, and an addict, you know, like the girl said, you know, she tried to get away from it, but it is a disease, and people don't understand that. Because if it's a disease, then there should be something you can take to treat it. There should be something, you know, whatever, and you know, and it's a matter of wanting to get well. And it's not an easy thing to do, no matter what your drug of choice is. Recovery is hard, you know, and it sounds real easy, you know, go to meetings, stop doing what you're doing, you know. It sounds real easy, but it's not. It's very hard. And until I decided to change my life and put sobriety number 1, or you know, for you know, there was no way I was going to succeed. and my family had to understand that. And so I've worked the program really good, and my life is a lot better. I've been able to make amends to a lot of the people I hurt, mainly my family and my parents, and there's other people too. But it's something that was really hard for me, really difficult to me, because I loved what I was doing, and it had a grip on me, and I can't tell you how many times I tell myself, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to, but I could not just, my body would just not say no. My body would not just say no. And no matter how hard I tried on my own, it didn't work out for me. It wasn't until my youngest daughter came to us and she said, I have a crack cocaine problem. And she was into ecstasy. And she's got a great life now. She's married, great, she's wonderful. She's been clean and sober for a long time. And so we ended up going to a family outpatient clinic with her. I thought, okay, I'm living my own life, and Stacy came with this problem, and I'm allowed to use her name in my leads and stuff. And she said that, they wanted to talk to us because she was living at home. And that's when I began to learn what addiction is. It's a family disease. An addict is a very selfish person. And I felt I could do anything I wanted because it was me and I'm not hurting anybody else. But going to I lived at this rehab center for like 5 days a week for like 7 or 8 weeks. And I'm still actively using. And I was not a very happy camper there, because it was the first time I really had to face who I was. I had to look in the mirror. And I began to learn about addiction, but, it was still another 2 years before I reached my bottom and decided to change my life. But, being the addict, I always felt that I could do what I want. I wasn't harming anybody, but yet I never saw the true effect it had on my family. One of the examples we use is, whenever, I don't know if the kids, when my kids were little, they're in their 30s now, late 30s, we hung these mobiles above the crypts, and they were always like colorful birds or something, And the idea was they could lay in bed and they could look up and it would really entertain them. And so a mobile is like a family of a family living with an addict. And when you push one of those birds, let's say you hit the cardinal, all of a sudden the blue jay starts moving, the robin starts moving, and everything starts shifting in the dynamics. And that's the way the addict affects the family. But see, the addict doesn't see that. I never saw it. I never saw it until I myself went into rehab. And like I said, I began learning these things through my daughter. And it took me another 2 years to reach my bottom where I went into a support group and just, and I had to give my life up to God. Some people believe in a higher power. I believe in God, and Jesus Christ. And my own thinking, I couldn't do it by myself. In recovery, you got to have a power greater than yourself to restore you to sanity. And my own thinking just kept doing the thing. I kept doing the same thing over and over. It was like Groundhog Day, And if I, and I always, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And my results never changed no matter what I did. So I couldn't do it by myself, and so I needed help. And so all of a sudden, the things I learned 2 years before when my daughter was going through recovery and rehab, all of a sudden that started making sense for me. And so therefore, I began my recovery, and they say never make any major life-changing decisions in your first year of sobriety and recovery. And 9 months later, I found myself living in Pittsburgh going to seminary. And I fought that for a long time. I just couldn't believe why God would want me to be a minister. But my wife saw it, and a few other people in my church saw it, so I finally accepted it. And going into my senior year, my last year at seminary, I thought, well, I'll get this small church in the country, you know. Mary always wanted horses, and we could have this nice country small church out in the middle of nowhere. And about halfway through my last year, I heard God telling me, no, you're not going to get that small church in the country. So I got this small church in downtown Elyria. It's close to the country. Oh, yeah, I'm in the country right now, you know. But you know, God has a sense of humor. And so I'm downtown Elyria. We serve meals to the hungry. We open our doors to the homeless on cold nights. We have a clothing ministry. And a lot of the people in downtown Elyria that are on the streets or whatever having issues have my business card. You know, and I do the best I can to help them through whatever and try to guide them the best I can do and direct them. But, you know, it's a hard battle. And, you know, we can sit up here and give you statistics, and I'm not an expert. I'm just speaking from where I'm from. And until that person decides they need help, they're not going to get any help at all. You know, and it can tear their families apart because you love them, but you don't love what they're doing. But yet you gotta be hard. The hardest thing we had to do as parents was to kick my daughter out of the house. So here she is. She's in the throes of recovery, a former crack addict. She could have been actively using, and we had to say, you can't live here anymore because you're not following our rules. Because we learned in recovery, you can set boundaries. And so she left, and we had no idea what was going to happen to her. You know? But like I said, she's doing really well. She's married, has got 2 great kids. She married into the family. And her daughters are great. One's a Marine now, and everything's great. So she's a success story. But like we saw, we don't have success stories all the time. And I know this is about opioids and opiates and everything, but my son was 41 years old, and he died 9 days after he turned 41 because he was an alcoholic. Now, we don't think that alcoholism is really that serious anymore, even though we see ads all the time. I guess alcohol could be a depressant and things like that, whatever, but you know, drugs are serious, whether it's alcohol, whether it's marijuana, whether it's cocaine, whether it's heroin, they all kill. They all kill. And so, as a minister, I've kind of lived it in a way. My family's suffered through it. We've lost our son because of it. And so, what am I supposed to do? I wasn't sure where my place was in this forum this morning, or this evening. I just think it's because I've kind of walked the walk a little bit. I can speak from the heart. As hard as we want to save these people, they need to want to be saved. And I've got friends that have been in recovery rehabs 4 different times. Some get it and some don't get it. You just don't turn it off, and you don't change right away. The first 9 months of sobriety for me was the ugliest 9 months of my life. I was worse then than I was when I was actively doing things. I was an emotional train wreck, and my wife looked at me like I was crazy, and I probably was crazy, you know. So it's a hard road, and it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of patience, but it takes a lot of love. You can love the person, but you don't need to love the disease. And sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not. Okay, no, I hear you. I'm not very technologically things here, you know. Stop. Okay. I think I hit stop. I don't know. I may have hit the pause button or whatever. So it may go off in 9 minutes. So anyways, I guess, I don't know what else to say other than, it's a battle. And the church needs to care because, as the pastor's wife says, it affects everybody. We can't be afraid to not talk about it because it's here. And it will always be here. The idea, and, we can talk about, getting on top of this, but, it's going to take a lot of work and it's going to take a lot of money, because rehabs aren't cheap. But, if a person's willing to do it, they will have a chance to succeed. I work at it every day, and the saying is, my addiction's out in the parking lot doing push-ups right now. It's out there just waiting for me, And I know if I just go out and have one more drink or one more whatever, I'll be off and running like I never stopped again. I've seen that too many times. I've had friends die from these things. A lot of people come into the rooms of recovery and then they decide to go back out, like Marin did. And not everybody comes back, and it's truly life and death. So I've spoken too long. I appreciate being here, and we need to be on top of this, and I'm sure we'll get a lot of information about statistics and everything. And but I don't know. I guess God placed me here for a reason. I'm not quite sure what exactly it was, but that's the way it works in my life. God says do this, I say I don't want to, and then God says do this, I say I don't want to. Well, you never win that argument. So anyways, I've spoken enough. Don, thanks for having me, and good luck if you're facing these issues right now. So God bless.
Thank you, Pastor Rick. I really appreciate hearing that straight from the heart. Our next guest is going to be Chief Whiteley. Did I say that right?
You did.
From the Elyria Police Department, who's going to give us a little heads up on what's happening in Elyria. Thank you, sir.
I am not a pastor. So, first of all, standing up, way up, is unusual for me, and I'll tell you a little uncomfortable. Podiums are not me. I walk. Thank God he gave me a mic. I did not know what I was supposed to talk about tonight. I wasn't sure what the group was, and I wasn't sure the message that they wanted me to try to give, because when you're talking about drugs, there's so many different messages. I can tell you last year that myself, along with several other people, including Greg Mailing, who works for the sheriff here, we went around to every Elyria City school class that was 4th grade and higher, and we gave a talk on drugs. I'm going to tell you, there's not a family in any of those groups that I met with that did not have somebody that was addicted to some type of drug. And when you have 4th graders that are coming up to you and saying, help me, my mom is an addict, and they can tell you everything about the drug, whatever drug it is. Unfortunately, at this point, the drug that we deal with most often is heroin, and quite often with fentanyl mixed in. To have these children be able to explain it to you, how the parents are using it, how their brothers and sisters are using it, and their friends, it's an eye-opening experience. It's a very sad experience. And I get questions. I get questions like, why don't they just stop? Well, I think we all should realize that it's not something you can just stop. So I try to talk to them at a level that they understand, which is easy for me because some people say I never grew up. I ask them questions about something that everybody knows something about, and that's music. Now, if you really knew me and knew that I had absolutely zero artistic ability, you would think that's funny. But I asked them, I said, how many of you know who Prince was? About half in every class would raise their hand. How many here who knows who Prince was? Okay. How many of you know who Michael Jackson was? How many of you know who Elvis Presley was? How about Whitney Houston? Even in the classes, school classes, down to 4th grade, the person that they all knew the most was Elvis Presley. And when I asked that question, I said, he died in 1977. How do you know him? My mom won't stop playing his records. So I asked him, I said, you know, you know who all these people are, and you know that at one point in their life, they were the most famous, recognizable entertainer in the entire world. And they're like, yeah, great singer. I love this song. I love that song. I said, what did Prince die of? I don't know. Drug overdose. I said, how about Michael Jackson? What did he die of? Some of them knew that. Drug overdose. Whitney Houston? While she technically died of drowning, she was high on cocaine when she slipped into the tub and drowned. And then, of course, Elvis Presley died of a drug overdose. So my point to them is, understand, these people had everything at their fingertips. They had all the money in the world. They knew everybody. They couldn't go anywhere without being recognized. And drugs still killed them. What does that mean for you and me? What will drugs do to us? And the comment back was, well, it'll kill us. Saying it and actually understanding and realizing it are two different things. We need to open our eyes as a community. One of the comments I heard when I came in was, we need to realize what the church's role is in all this. I'm going to expand that a little bit, and I'm going to say the community's role. Number one, we have to stop denying that this is a problem. We have to stop looking at people who have this addiction to anything as there's something wrong with them, because what's wrong with them is what's wrong with all of us. We all have the ability to have an addiction. My dad is a recovering alcoholic. His 80th birthday is coming up next month. He's been sober for 34 years, and I know that because he became sober 4 days after I graduated high school. Because my dad is a recovering alcoholic and there is an issue with heredity, that would make me susceptible to it. Now, when I was 18, I could have gone either way. But I had the opportunity to attend some of these classes with my dad. Some of these AA meetings, which I got to tell you, some of them were downright scary. And I got to learn that there is a hereditary part of this, and that I am susceptible, which I never considered before. I became the person who was the designated driver everywhere we went with all my friends. I got made fun of a lot because I would be the one person who wouldn't drink anything. And I did that because I was so afraid to be what I saw my dad doing. Now understand, to me, my dad is the greatest person who ever lived. And he still had an addiction. How could the greatest person who ever lived have this? Because he's still a person. And he taught me a lot through what his trials were. And he's helped me throughout my entire life without even knowing he's doing it in many different ways. I don't think I could feel comfortable talking to people about any kind of addiction if I didn't live it through my dad. And I didn't know what it felt like, and I didn't know what it looked like. So we have to accept that we're all, I'll say, an addict in waiting. It's just the steps we take that will direct us that way or direct us away from it. And I was very lucky because I had somebody to direct me away. It isn't always that way. I have people who are very close to me that are addicted to different kinds of things. I even know somebody very close to me who's addicted to heroin. It's been recovering 5 years. Every day I'm praying because it's a very difficult thing. It can always snag you back up. Other things that we can do as a community, and I'm going to tell you the scary part is, and I think you said Todd Snooters are coming back next week. He'll tell you there are very few facilities to help people who have an addiction. It's great that we can identify people, but where do we send them? Where do they get help? This is where churches come in. This is where all you come in, because you can be part of that. I am no expert. I can't tell you how, but there are ways. There has to be a way. And the more chance that we have to get groups of people together to fight this, the better chance we have of winning this. I can tell you, this whole 2017, I kept hearing from people, oh, that opiate problem, that's getting better. It's not getting better. In 2016, we had 170 overdoses in Elyria. In 2016, we had 170. 2017, we had 210. Does that sound like it's getting better? It's not. We're still having overdoses. So for us to go with the thought process that it's getting better isn't going to work. How about the thought process of, well, that ain't my family. It's not going to affect me. How many people here know somebody who's addicted to some form of alcohol or drugs? Look around. It's affecting all of us. You're going to hear the sheriff come up and talk. You're going to hear Doc Evans call up and talk. I can tell you firsthand, Doc Evans has been in Elyria way too many times on these. He'll tell you about it. He's a busy guy, so is the sheriff. And for them to take time out of their schedule to come here to talk to the community, it's got to be bad because they have so many things to deal with and they have to prioritize what they're doing. And yet, here they are tonight coming here to talk to you. I wish I had the answer. Actually, I'd probably be very, very rich right now if I did. And my wife would love that. But I don't. I'm kind of learning as I go, too. You saw the video of Marin Riggs. That's the first time I saw that one. And there are thousands of people who are going through that same thing every day. The first one I got to hear was Kelly Johnson. Kelly's son Ryan started using in high school. Born and raised in Elyria. Went to Northwood and Elyria High. And 24 years old, he died of a drug overdose. And it was heroin. I got to hear her story, and oh my God, it's just heart-wrenching to listen to it. Especially to hear a mother say that about her child. I speak with all the principals in Elyria, and one of them told me, this was probably a year or so ago, junior high principal, and he says, I try to keep track of my students and what their accomplishments are after they leave my school. He says, unfortunately, part of that is I keep track of my students that pass away too. And I said, wow, I've not heard that before. How many do you have? He said 24. He's not been the principal that long. And he's had 24 students die. He said most of them to drugs. Not all of them, but most of them. We got to do something. We're here to help. I wish I could say we're the answer, but we're just part of it, just like you are. We need to work together. We need to get more treatment facilities. I mean, I'm a law enforcement guy, so you're going to hear me campaign about we need to put these drug dealers away, because too many times we arrest the same guy over and over again and nothing happens. And they're out on the street dealing again, and they get arrested again, and they don't go to jail again until they end up killing somebody. And then if we're lucky enough to get the information that we can go against them, we will charge them with murder for selling drugs that killed somebody. I think right now we have 6 or 7 that have either been convicted or on the verge of being convicted for that. 6 or 7. And I just told you we had 210 overdoses. I don't think we're going to win it that way. So our best hope is to get people to stop using, and even more so, to keep people from starting up to begin with. You know that you hear statistics, and Tom will probably be able to tell you better next week what this is, but they say 4 out of 5 people who are hooked on heroin got there through prescription medication. And that's because they go to the doctor because they're hurt. Doctor gives them a script for so many. They use them up. They're hooked. They have to find something. The doctors are cognizant of this now, and they're trying to limit that, but everybody has a different level on what will make them hooked. And when the prescription's taken away, they go to the next closest thing, which is heroin. They're all opiates. Gives you the same feeling. And heroin is the next cheapest thing. To buy OxyContin by the pill is astronomical compared to buying a packet of heroin. So they do it that way. I pray every day that my kids don't ever try it. They are tired of hearing me talk about it. But that doesn't mean they won't. And I hope that if I hope it never happens, but we have to, if we get the right facilities going and the right groups working together, I don't see any other way other than that to get this, to turn this around. I'm sure, just looking at the sheer number of people in the audience, that there are a number of addicts here. A lot of them are going to be alcohol. I had a kid tell me one time, well, there's a drug in cigarettes. Yes, there is, nicotine. And he says, that'll kill you too. And he's right, it will. It takes a lot of years, but it will do it. And it is a drug, so he wasn't wrong there. Our society has accepted that. But it's still a drug, and it still can kill you over time. Alcohol can do it a lot quicker, and heroin and fentanyl is going to do it like right now. So we have to band together. We have to fight this. Right now, I don't have anything else to say. I'm sure you're going to bring somebody else up, but I'll be available for any questions afterwards. That maybe we can get together and figure something out, because we got to do something.
Good job. Thank you, Chief. Wow, what an interesting evening. We have the Lorain County Sheriff with us as well, Phil Stamiti, all dressed up and ready to go. Phil, you want to come on up?
Yep. Thank you, Don.
Okay.
Thank you, Don, and I want to thank the church also and the pastor for hosting this forum for us. I know it's a tough act to follow with a pastor and a police chief, for me to follow those guys, but I can tell you that, they always say it takes a community to raise a child. Well, obviously it's going to take all our communities to tackle this problem, which is an epidemic right now, I can tell you that for sure. I'm not going to try and get into a whole lot of statistics, because I know Doc Evans don't want me to steal all his material, because he'll be getting into a lot of that. But, we have a drug task force here in Lorain County also with agents. Elyria Police, they have a narcotics unit. Lorain Police has a narcotics unit. But I can tell you, we're all overwhelmed with everything that's going on now. And Doc will tell you now that, with this heroin and fentanyl and, they're even mixing it with cocaine now. We find these guys, sometimes we'll get them to jail and we try to get them weaned off of stuff, and maybe they don't get it for like 30 days. Then they get back out, run with the same gang and start using again. Well, they kind of, after 30 days not having it, and then all of a sudden now you get a hit of something which has got the fentanyl in it too. We find these addicts, and Doc finds them with the needle still stuck in their arms. It goes in, hits their heart, and they stop, heart stops and you stop breathing. So it's really a big problem. But I can tell you, this isn't just Lorain County's problem. It's a national problem. It's probably a world problem that we don't know a lot of things about. But conservative estimates that I have is there's over 42,000 deaths in 2016, which is obviously a 28% increase from 15. This synthetic opiate fentanyl is the main cause of a lot of these deaths. And like I say, it's mixed with the heroin. They're mixing it with cocaine and other drugs. Doc will tell you too probably that a lot of this is, some of it's getting to be pure fentanyl, which is very powerful. And the opiate, it's funny, the opiate epidemic alone is deadlier than the AIDS epidemic was at its peak. And I can remember that AIDS epidemic when everybody was panicking when that was going on. And there was a lot of deaths with that too back then. And then while drug mortality has been increasing among all age groups since 1999, it's currently highest among the ages of 25 to 54-year-olds. You see the same obituaries that I read in the paper every day. When you see a 25 to 30-year-old person that just said they died suddenly, people at that age group don't just die suddenly. There's a reason for that. They're not all having heart attacks. Most of them, I can tell you, are drug overdoses. And you'll even read in some where the parents will even come out and say, this is what happened. They were addicted to drugs and they died from a drug overdose because they want to get the word out, just like Marion's parents wanted to do. And I applaud the Attorney General, Mike DeWine. He's been at the forefront of this since it started, and he tries to do all the forums, and he tries to get the word out, which is very important because some people still don't believe this is a problem to this day. They'll tell you, oh, that don't go on in my neighborhood, or that don't go on in my family, that don't go on at the schools. And like the chief mentioned before, I can guarantee you it goes on in everybody's neighborhood. It goes on at every school and everywhere around. And somebody doesn't know somebody or know them personally that doesn't have these problems nowadays. Now the doc will talk too. He can tell you probably where most of this fentanyl is being made up, and a lot of it we know is coming from Mexico. Some of it's coming from China and other places too. But there's another thing called carfentanil. I don't know if you ever heard of that one. That's actually even more powerful than fentanyl. We even just recently, Cleveland police had people approaching the metro parks over in Cleveland at the zoo, trying to make deals to buy some of this carfentanil. And because that's a tranquilizer for like large animals, elephants, larger animals. So you can imagine how powerful that stuff is. I can tell you, the Lorain County Drug Task Force, along with every police department in Lorain County, has been attempting to target and dismantle those who supply all these drugs. I can tell you it's a problem that, we're really not winning any. One thing we have done, and which Lorain County, we've been working with a drug enforcement agency. We've been designated as a HIDA department at Lorain County, and it covers all the police departments. That's a high-intensity drug impact unit. Now, we have some feds that are coming in to help with our drug task force, which some of the money and funding is coming with it. But I can tell you, we're in an area right now between New York, Detroit, Chicago, where a lot of these drugs are passing through here every day. I mean, they're coming on the turnpike, they're coming on 90, they're coming on the interstates. We try to do as many drug interdictions as we can, but I can tell you, for every one we get, there's probably 10 of them that are getting through that you don't even know about. I know as a law enforcement officer that we cannot arrest ourselves out of this problem. We can't build more jails and more prisons, because I can guarantee you that is not the answer. Just like Chief Whiteley mentioned before, we need more treatment centers. Everybody knows that. We don't have enough in Lorain County. Drugs are a big deal, but I can tell you mental health issues is another one that's really expanded. So we're trying to deal with that on the front too. But I can tell you, there's 422 inmates in the Lorain County Jail. That's how many inmates we held, and I can tell you, we always have a full house, unfortunately. And 90% of those people that are incarcerated in there, they either have drug problems or alcohol problems or a combination of both. And what happens from that is, and I'm sure a lot of you know also, is that these people are out committing a lot of crimes because they need money for their next fix, their next, whatever they need to get. Nobody's giving them any money. They're not working. I can guarantee you most of them aren't working. So they're breaking into homes. They're stealing from their family members. They're stealing stuff in stores. Anything to get, like Chief Whiteley said, and I know Doc Evans is going to mention it too, is that you can probably buy a pack of heroin to get a hit for $10. That's pretty cheap versus pills that you might have to spend $60 or $70 for. You're going to go to the cheapest thing. There for a while, we know these drug dealers are actually giving it to them for nothing. Now, let me give it to you a couple times here. Then I get you hooked on it. Now you're going to be coming back to me. And they know that. Believe me, they're no dummies, these cartels and these dealers. But that's the ones we want to try and concentrate on, is some of the bigger dealers. They're hard to get, I can tell you, because they don't exist around here because they're making good money. And they're usually, like I say, they got front men in front of them, so it's just a tough one. But I can tell you in Lorain County alone last year, we had over 1,200 calls for overdoses that went into our 911 center. That's reported ones. We know there's several more that don't even get reported. One thing that we did start, and Lorain County Police Department started, is a thing called Police Assisted Recovery Program. That's a program that some states started in Connecticut, Massachusetts. This is where if you have a drug addict and he knows, hey, I want to get me some help, but where do I go? They can come to the police departments. And, they can turn in their stuff. We're not there to try to arrest them. What we're going to do is try to get them into a program. I don't know if you ever heard of the Let's Get Real program. That's where they'll come in. Obviously, we get a hold of counselors. They'll come in, take them, try to get them into a bed. And I can tell you, we've had about 50 of those since its inception, and we've all got them admitted into some. And like the pastor mentioned, they're not going to ask for any help. And until they hit rock bottom, and a lot of them don't realize even when they hit rock bottom, is when they're probably going to try to get you some help. But in that 18-month period, we've actually had put 50 people into treatments. But that doesn't mean they're staying in the treatment. That doesn't mean that they're not going to fall off the wagon and go back, because it's going to happen. We all know that. One thing I did want to mention, and Doc Evans, he graduated high school with me, by the way, too. But he's got a lot more hair than I got. But he's a great guy, and I can tell you he's very passionate about this. And he was instrumental with Senator Gail Manning from North Ridgeville, who's our senator and the state legislator, great lady, and Doc, to get Narcan here. We were the pilot program in 2013, this Noxaline that was given out. Now, actually, the hospitals helped us get the stuff. The health department now is getting it out. And, I hear these complaints, and I can tell you, I even hear from some sheriffs. They go, hey, Sheriff, why are you trying to help these bums and this and that, and helping them do that? And I said, well, first of all, when I got in police work, I can tell you, I started in 1973 at the Lorain Police Department, and I worked in Narcotics Bureau. I always thought we were here to help people. And I still look at it that way. I still love my job, and I still say we're here to help people in the system. And yeah, do we deal with a certain element of society that probably nobody else wants to deal with? Yeah. I told them, people don't call us when they're having a good time. They call us when there's something going on. They either have a domestic or, you meet people sometimes at their worst. But we got to still realize that we're all human beings here, and we all have errors in judgment, and we all make mistakes. But I can tell you with that Narcan, we've had over 350 saves since this has been implemented. And I'm sure Doc probably has more figures than that. And since we started that pilot program, now there's a bill that was passed where every police department in Ohio can get this. And most of them, I can tell you, do have it now. But the problem, when we first started, there was a lot of heroin, and maybe you just squirt it up your nose. It's very easy. The officers were kind of apprehensive at first, but once we showed them how to use it, now they have no issues with it. You could give them one hit of that. Maybe now with the fentanyl, Doc will tell you, sometimes you have to do it 5 or 6 times. And sometimes after you bring them back, they're going to wake up and they're going to fight with you. Well, that's all part of it. I tell my guys, hey, you just got to try to get them under control because, you know, people in that state of mind aren't really thinking real well. One thing we also started in Lorraine County, which I thought was a great program, we call it the Drug Take-Back Program. Since 2010, we've run these with DEA, and the West Shore group out of Cuyahoga County started it with us, where we would take any type of medications at the 15 different police departments. And I know Doc will mention this too, how people, you know, you go to the doctor and maybe you have surgery or you have something going on, and he'll give you 30 pills, oxycodone or whatever, and maybe you take 2 or 3 of them and you say, I'm not going to take any more. Well, it sits in your medicine cabinet. Well, Doc knows, and he knows sometimes teenagers and young kids will go in their parents' or grandparents' homes and sometimes find these drugs and take some of it. So we're trying to get a lot of that off the streets and also where people aren't flushing them down the toilet. We've taken, I think just in 2017, almost up to 4 tons of medications. And we're kind of lucky because we work with DEA on this, where they'll burn it in an incinerator so we can get rid of it illegally too that way. But it's been a great program. And also, if you have old medications, don't be afraid to call us. We'll come and pick them up. And we also have drop boxes in each police department now where you can go in there. It's just like a mailbox. You stick your drugs in there and close it. And then we take them out of there at the end of the month. And then we'll get that stuff to DEA. So that's been a good program to get a lot of these older drugs off the streets, the stuff that people aren't using anymore. We're also in a process right now of training our deputies it's called a quick response team. We called it originally the Opiate Quick Response Team, but we're working with the Addis board, Elaine Georges, and Lakata also, Tom Stuber, who's a great guy, the Primary Purpose House. We're going to put together teams, and we've already trained some of our deputies and some of the policemen where when we have these overdoses, within 72 hours that we know, we're going to try to get to that addict and get to that addict's family to try to get that person some help. Now, everybody's not going to want help. We understand that. Sometimes you'll go to the homes and they'll tell you, hey, get the heck out of here, take a hike, we don't want you around. But sometimes if we can influence the families and get some of these counselors and find out where they can get them into these different recovery centers, that's what we want to try to do. So that's one of our goals that we're working on right now too. I just talked to my chief deputy this morning, Dennis Kavanaugh, very passionate about this also. And another thing I know Doc probably can mention too is that we're starting to see more drugs, this thing called crystal methamphetamine, these meth labs that they're doing. That is another very powerful thing that's going on right now, and Doc maybe you can expound on that. But it's funny that Chief Whiteley had mentioned today's Elvis's birthday. I don't know if he knew that or not, but my wife told me that today's his birthday. So, I personally believe that the churches need to get involved. I mean, I'm a Catholic, you know, but I know everybody's different denominations of religion. But to me, if you don't have Jesus and God in your life, I don't care what you are, you don't even have to be an addict. You're going to have a tough life in this world. And the churches, they're going to play a big role in this. At least if they can maybe get to some of the family members who eventually maybe can get to the addicts. I can tell you, I got a personal history with this. About 5 years ago, my son-in-law, we found out he got hooked on heroin. I would have never believed that if you'd have told me that. But, you know, you could see things to start indicating. I mean, he had a problem at work. He ended up losing one job. He went to another one. And I still didn't know. I said, well, maybe, you know, he was really a good kid. I just was about, wow, this. And then my daughter started having things missing from the house. And she's saying, gee, my earrings are gone. My one necklace that I had is missing. And, you know, we're thinking, God, what's happening? Is somebody getting in the home and something going on there? Well, then I get a phone call one day from the Lorraine Police Department. They said, hey, we pulled this guy over that's related to you. I go, who's that? They give me his name. It's my son-in-law. They says, we found him at this one drug house that we know is selling. So, unbeknownst to my daughter, I didn't tell anybody that well. I called everybody over to the home one day, with him included. And I tried to talk to my daughters first, and she said, there's no way. There's no way he's doing any of that. He's not on anything. And so I said, okay, I went in and I said, let me see your arms. Let me see your legs. I checked him over. He had needle marks all over him, but he always had covered them up. He finally broke down and said, you know, I've been addicted to heroin for a little while. He had back surgery about 5 years ago, was prescribed some of the oxycodone, went back to the doctor, said, I'm still having some issues, prescribed him some more, and before you know it, he's hooked on this stuff, but unbeknownst to all of us. I mean, when you looked at him, he looked normal like anybody else, and he functioned normal for a long while. But if you think, like I told people, this isn't going to affect somebody, it affects everybody in every walk of life. And I try to tell people that, and I can tell you, if there's any, you know, I run a DARE program at the sheriff's office too, that drug abuse resistance education for fifth and sixth graders in all the schools. And I tell you, I believe in that program very much, but just like Chief Wiley had mentioned, these kids will write essays, and when you hear about some of them, I mean, these kids are just so honest that they'll talk about their parents being addicted to different drugs and this and that, and, you know, they sit up there and cry, and they read these essays to us, and we're like crying right along with them, you know what I mean? Because it's hard to believe that these things go on, but they go on every day in our lives. And like I say, once again, without the church's involvement, we're not going to win this battle either. I can guarantee you that. So I could get into more facts and figures, but I'm not going to, because I know Doc's he's going to cover about, unfortunately, how many deaths we probably had in Lorain County and what's going on in this county. But I'm passionate about this too, and like I say, it's, you know, we're willing to help anybody out that we can. As far as the drug task force that I have, we'll go out anywhere and talk to anybody. We have about 10 different agents. Detective Gray Mailing, I can tell you, and he's very passionate about this also, and he has a lot of knowledge on this. He actually went down and testified in Columbus a few times in front of the state legislatures about the Narcan when we got it, and about with Attorney General DeWine when he spoke about the problems that we have here in Lorain County. And like I say, I know Doc can scare you with the figures that we have, and I don't see it getting any better, unfortunately. But we can't give up trying. You know, I know, like I say, I know a sheriff, and you probably know him down in Butler County. He don't believe in any of this. He says, oh, these guys are getting this Narcan, they're shooting up, and then when one guy's close to death, they're shooting him up with this Narcan to bring him back. I said, well, even if that's true, aren't we here to really save people's lives and help them? Because the grand jury has to tour the jail every 90 days. And once in a while, I'll get somebody on the grand jury, the same thing. Gee, Sheriff, why are you taking care of all these bums? And, you know, people think back, you know, I started 45 years ago in law enforcement. And you think of a drug addict sitting in an alley somewhere shooting up. Well, that's not what it's like anymore, folks. I can guarantee you. Like I tell them, these bums that you're talking about are our sons, daughters, our neighbors. You know, they're our family members, whether you want to believe it or not. And like I say, we all got to work together. And I'm glad the church put on this forum, because we need the churches to be involved. I can tell you that's for sure. For the family members also. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Don. Thank you. You too.
This has really been an interesting evening thus far. Our final guest for the evening, and let me start by saying we won't have time for a question and answer session. However, our guests will remain afterwards, so if you would like to talk to them, feel free to. But our final guest for tonight is the county coroner, Stephen Evans. Thank you, sir, for coming. Okay.
Can you hear me? Does it work? You want to stand up for a minute? I know it's been a long night already. To stretch your legs for a second.
Yeah, I'll stand up again.
Good evening, and thanks for putting on this program, because I think it is something we really need to talk about. You're going to put this slide up?
He's still struggling.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. As you can see, I have a small department. You can sit down if you like. I have a small department. It's basically 5 doctors, an office manager, and an investigator. And a couple years ago, we found ourselves, our small department, in the middle of a huge problem. We're in the middle of the opioid epidemic, which we've been talking about tonight. We came to grips with this in about 2012. If you look at the slide, I mean, we were bumped up a little bit in 2010, 2011, our overdose deaths. And then all of a sudden in 2012, we tripled the number of overdose deaths in 1 year, went from 20 to over 60 in 1 year. And we said, when it first happened, we said, oh, well, there must be bad drugs on the street. That's the problem. You know, there must be some toxic drug on the street. And so we tested the drugs and we said, no, it's the same drugs that we've had before, but all of a sudden we tripled. The other thing we noticed was the demographics had completely changed. This was no longer an inner city, lower socioeconomic class. It was no longer just the inner city of Lorraine or inner city of Elyria. This was the entire county. This was mainly white. It was mainly middle class, suburban. A lot of these people were employed. A lot of them were women. In days gone by, if you go back into 1980s, 1990s, this was a 90% male problem. All of a sudden in the 2000s, this is a female problem just as well as the men. He said, what happened? How did this happen all of a sudden? What had happened, we were in the opiate epidemic. And in fact, if anything, we were late to the party. We didn't get hit till 2012. In 2007, opiate or drug overdoses became the leading cause of accidental death in Ohio. It wasn't until 2012 till Lorraine County really got hit. So we were really late to the party. And if you look at the numbers, I mean, everybody's mentioned some of the numbers, but 600 people a day are dying in the world of a drug overdose. I mean, 100 people die, and actually it's actually over 150 now. This slide is 2 years old. Over 150 people die every day in the United States of a drug overdose. Something like 8. This slide also has gone up from 5 to 8 in the state of Ohio every day. In Lorraine County, we're about 3 a day, or 3 a week, I'm sorry, 3 a week they're dying. If you look at the numbers, just to put it in perspective, we're having more people die, Americans die every year in the United States than died in the 20 years of the Vietnam War. Every year, more people are dying than in the 20 years of the Vietnam War that we were in. If you look at compare us, Ohio, to the rest of the United States, you see the numbers are going up in the rest of the United States, but we're going up even faster. And in fact, the statistics show that Ohio is either number 1 or number 2 in drug overdose deaths. And in fact, our neighboring states, Kentucky, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, they're all in the top 5. So we're right in the epicenter of this problem. We're in the worst part of it for the entire United States. Again, Ohio's seeing the same thing we're seeing in Lorraine County, that this is becoming more and more of a female problem also. The other thing we're seeing is this is getting younger and younger. Most of the people I'm seeing that are dying in Lorraine County are in that 20 to 40-year-old age group. The youngest person I had was a 2-year-old that got a hold of family members' drugs. The oldest person I had was a 75-year-old that was sharing a hit of heroin with his grandson. But it's mainly in that 20 to 40-year-old age group. I mean, we saw the film of the young lady who died that was 20 years old. We're living that almost a daily or every other day in Lorraine County. Before I came here, I got a call at 4 o'clock, and before I came here, I was at the house of a 30-year-old young lady who died. So, I mean, this is almost a daily event nowadays in Lorraine County. Well, what is it we're dealing with? You know, what are these opiates? You know, throw the name around, opiates, everybody, opiates. So you think, oh, it's heroin. Well, actually, opiates are any of the chemicals, they're narcotic pain medicines that originally were derived from the opium plant. And a lot of these are things that you recognize because you probably had in your own medicine cabinet. Things like codeine, Percocet, Vicodin. These are all opiates. They're just as dangerous and just as addicting as heroin, which is another opiate. And so I like to call these pills heroin in pill form because they're just as dangerous, and as we'll see, they're what started the problem. If you can see, if you go back in time, 1980s, early 1990s, mainly people were dying of heroin and cocaine. And all of a sudden in the late 1990s, we had this huge population dying from pills, from narcotic pills. And then at the very end of the slide, you can see it was heroin. But where's the big rise? The big rise is from the narcotic pain pills. And this is why. Because in the mid-1990s, a couple of our drug companies came out with some strong pain medicine. Purdue Pharmaceutical came out with Oxycontin. Janssen Pharmaceuticals came out with fentanyl. Endo Pharmaceuticals came out with Opana. These were strong narcotic pain pills. They went to the United States government and they said, doctors and hospitals are underprescribing these pain pills. You know, we have a lot of people out there in pain, and we've made these drugs and they're safe and non-addicting. We have a study, they did a study, the Purdue Pharmaceuticals did a study, and they said, no, these drugs are safe and non-addicting. And they told the government, they said, doctors need to prescribe this more, hospitals need to prescribe this more. And so the government, in their wisdom, passed laws and made pain the fifth vital sign. And they went to the doctors and the hospitals and they said, we're going to gauge your compensation based on your patient satisfaction, which included pain relief. And so they basically encouraged the doctors, encouraged the hospitals to prescribe more and more pain medicine. And so as you can see, what happened, the more and more pain medicine we got, the more and more deaths we got. Well, let's go back to the heroin, the problem that you probably thought you were going to hear mainly about when you came in. You know, people think of heroin, they think of the gentleman used the term junkie, but think of people injecting heroin into their arm or something of that nature. When actually most of these drugs, people start with the pills, 80% or more start with the pills, and then they start snorting the pills. They shave the pills and they snort it. It's not till later that they start snorting heroin, and then eventually they start injecting it. And it's a gradual process up because you need more and more drug, and the way to get the most drug is by injecting the heroin. If you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. It turns out that opium or heroin-like compounds, opium, have been available for thousands of years before Christ. And actually there were so many people that were addicted to opium in the 1700s and early 1800s that Merck Pharmaceuticals came out with a new drug that was safe and non-addicting. It was going to get everybody off of opium. It was a great drug. It was called morphine. And so they started using morphine a lot in the 1800s. Well, unfortunately, after the Civil War, there were so many people in the United States that were addicted to morphine that Bayer Pharmaceuticals did a great job for us. They came out with a new drug that was safe and non-addicting, one that was going to get us off of the morphine. It was such a heroic drug, they called it heroin. Heroin on the street is by many names. You know, I throw those up, but the truth of the matter is, you know, every place that you go is going to have a different name for the heroin that they're using. In fact, most of the drugs that we're seeing, as the sheriff and the police chief said, most of them are mixtures of heroin, fentanyl, and cocaine. Cocaine and heroin are famous. Combination is called a Belushi because that's what John Belushi died of. Fentanyl's been in the news because that's what the artist formerly known as Prince died of. Right currently, our biggest problem is with that fentanyl and heroin mixture. Heroin comes in many sizes, shapes, and colors. When we're at the scene of a death, we're looking for the works, what we call the works. And the works are usually a burnt spoon, like the lady's mother said that she was missing her spoons. The spoons were gone. And it's because they use the spoons, they put the powder in the spoon, they melt the powder, and they draw it up in a syringe. And so when we're at the death scene, we're looking for the works. They often inject the material into their arm. It's probably the most common area. But after they destroy the arm veins, then they'll be using any vein. I've seen people use veins from the top of the head to the bottom of their toes. They'll use any vein that they can find. Unfortunately, this is not pharmaceutical grade material. Also, they're not using aseptic techniques, so often you'll get little skin irritations, vein irritations from the chemical, and that'll leave drug tracks. And so often, like when I go out to restaurants with my wife and I'll say, you know, this person that just served us food has a drug problem. She said, well, how do you know that? Because I can see all the drug tracks when they're delivering the food. The other thing we see that you don't see is all the damage that's done inside the body. The drugs affect the heart, the lungs, affect every organ system. What you're going to see is the outside. You're going to see the changes in your friends or family that have a drug problem. This is not easy way of life. I mean, takes a toll on you in a very short order. You age. This is a slide. I don't know how well it's showing up in the back, but I think it's the most important slide to tell us where we're at and what we need to do. This is a slide it was from southern Ohio on the border of West Virginia. But a grandmother and her boyfriend overdosed on heroin in their car while it was running. Her 4-year-old grandson's in the back seat. The good news is the police got there in time and actually resuscitated the grandmother and the boyfriend, and they lived. And in fact used the Narcan that we started in Lorain County. We'll go through that in a minute. But the haunting part of this is the little boy in the back seat. He's looking at you. He's looking at me. He's saying, what's going to happen to me? What are we going to do about this problem? How are we going to solve this problem? How are we going to save our children? Let's go back to Lorain County. Remember, we tripled in 1 year? And when it happened, I thought, when it first happened, I thought, well, sooner or later, there won't be anybody at risk, right? Because there'll be so many people who already died, I won't have to worry anymore because there's nobody new to die. Well, then you realize for every person that died, there's 130 people who are addicted. There's over 800 people who are using drugs inappropriately. So how big of a risk, how many people are at risk in Lorain County? Whatever it figures out to when you do the numbers, it's 1 out of 6. So for the people who say, I don't know anyone who has a drug problem, you do, you just don't know you do. If you have 6 friends, you have 6 relatives, you have 6 neighbors, you have 6 co-workers, statistically, someone you know has a drug problem. It's that prevalent. The other thing when this happened in 2012, we said, we have to do something. We have to save these people. Our heart was aching. So many people were dying. So we put together a group that included the police departments, the sheriff's department, the hospitals, the Addis board, and a lot of the community organizations. We said, what can we do to save some of these people? We started Project Dawn Lorain County, and what we noticed was that people were dying before the rescue squad got to them. Because what happens when you overdose on heroin is you stop breathing. Well, how long can you hold your breath? You can't hold it for more than 3 or 4 minutes. Average rescue squad takes 10 minutes to get there, so by the time they get there, you're dead. On the other hand, police are constantly patrolling the neighborhoods, and so often they got there within a minute or two, and we thought if we can get the Narcan into the hands of the police officers, they might be able to save some people. And so we went to our local state senator and we said, Gail, can you help us? Because it's against the law to do that. When we first proposed it, everybody said you can't do it. We went to Gail Manning and she got a law passed making Lorain County a pilot project where our police officers were allowed to carry Narcan and give it. Naloxone Narcan. Naloxone is the generic name for Narcan. And basically what it is, it's a squirt gun. It's a squirt gun. You're just squirting it up the nose. And it's marvelous. It revives the people, if they're not dead yet, and the police officers in our year pilot project saved over 60 people. And as I already mentioned, they've already saved well over 400 people since then. So our police officers in Lorain County have saved hundreds of people. The good news is because we were successful in Lorain County, this spread to the rest of Ohio, and it spread to different places in the United States. I've been sharing the protocols and the policies that we use all over the United States and actually internationally too. I've talked to international police departments. So something we started in Lorain County is saving hundreds of people. It's going to save thousands of people in the state of Ohio and hopefully thousands more outside Ohio. Back to where we were. So we said, well, if you look at the statistics again, 2012, remember we tripled, and then we started our Narcan program, and we leveled off. We didn't go down, but we leveled off. We stopped the exponential growth. 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, we doubled again. We doubled again. So, oh my goodness. In fact, if you look at a bigger slide, from 2000, 2009, we averaged 12.5 deaths a year. In 2016, we had 132. That means we had 10 times our normal number of overdose deaths. What happened? Fentanyl happened. Fentanyl is a synthetic narcotic. It's a synthetic opiate. What the drug dealers found was you could make this up in a laboratory. You didn't need to grow up poppy seeds anymore. This was much easier for them. They could make up as much as they want. They're making it in China. They're making it in Mexico. They're making it in laboratories in the United States. They can make tons of it. The problem is it's 50 to 100 times stronger than heroin and morphine. And so when the dealers are putting this fentanyl they're mixing it with the heroin or mixing it with cocaine, or sometimes they're getting pure fentanyl, people are overdosing and dying. That's why we doubled again last year. I don't have the numbers for 2017 yet because it takes months to get the final results, but 2017 is going to be just as bad, if not worse, than 2016. As you can see, 2016, a good number of our deaths were from fentanyl. Heroin's still a major problem, and cocaine is coming back again. So what can you do? You're doing the first thing. Educate yourself. You need to understand what the problem is. I think, this is the way we're going to get through this, is by educating the public, certainly advocating for prevention, enforcement. I think the police departments do the best they can with the enforcement part, but we've dropped the ball with prevention and dropped the ball with treatment. We need to put more of our resources into those to try to save some of these people and to stop our young people from starting this problem. We need to help clean up our communities. As the sheriff was saying, 80% of our children start their drug habit from the home medicine cabinet. So, when I give this talk, sometimes people say, well, let's take all the drug dealers, let's take them all out and shoot them. Well, realize us as parents, we're the first drug suppliers to our children because 80% of them started their drug habit from the home medicine cabinet. So we can't take all the parents out and shoot them. Education is the way we're going to get through this. We need to educate our people. We need to do something. But a lifetime of addiction. So the next time you go in the hospital or you go to the emergency room or go to your dentist and they want to give you some Vicodin and say, no, I'll take some Motrin. You don't need to take that stuff. This is the end of the slide, the end of the picture. This is the picture we're in. It's a beautiful world, but right in the center is this tragedy. And the tragedy is this opiate epidemic. When I first put this slide up, when I first got this cemetery, I got one that had the number of people that died in Lorain County. Unfortunately, I need a cemetery 3 times the size at this point. That's it. Thank you.
It's hard to know exactly what to say after listening to these gentlemen tonight. I can tell you from my heart, when you get home tonight, look up John 13, I think it's verse 34. Jesus gave us a commandment, to love God with all of our heart, our souls, our minds. But in John 13, he gives us a second commandment, and that being to love others like you love yourselves. There's a young man that goes to church here. He's been at Primary Purpose now for several months, and he said something a couple of weeks ago that stuck with me. He said, I'm not a bad person. I'm just sick. And that's really what it is. When you leave here tonight, what I would like you to do is go back to your church. And there's no church in this county that can do everything. But go back to your church, your congregation, and try to sit down, pray about it, and figure out what your church can do to help, and perhaps we can get together and work on something as well. But I'll tell you, in my opinion, and it's only my opinion, one good thing that will help us make a good start is if we go out there and love these folks like Jesus. Love them like Jesus. Let me close just by praying, and again, our guests will be right down here, down front, and feel free to come up and speak with them, okay? Thank you for being here tonight. We'll be here again next week at 6:30. Okay? Let's pray. Father God, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord, for the opportunity we've had tonight to be here and to listen to the sheriff and the police chief and Pastor Rick and the coroner and just all of our guests tonight, Lord. They all had somewhat of a different message, but they all tie together. They all tell us that there's a problem out there and that the only way we can solve it is by working together. We need to love like Jesus. Lord, thank you again. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, folks, for coming tonight.
Thank you.